I'm going to come back in with some manganese blue, which is more of a vivid color as far as its saturation. You can see how much brighter that is than those other blues that I'm using. And I'm just touching the end here of these wings. And what that's doing is it's just, it's a wet and wet technique, and it's just adding more color. And I love the way that's bleeding in to this part of the wing. That's so beautiful. So what you're doing is you're seeing some of the kind of effects that you can get with watercolor. Very sort of delicate and fragile and spontaneous. Might just touch a little bit in here. This is already dried off, so we're going to get a different edge on that, and that's really okay, because I can come back here and just run some clear water along the edge if I don't want this to have a really hard edge. And see how I softened one edge and leave this part hard just to make it interesting. So now I'm going to grab some neutral tint and just use that to create the body. Because what I'm wanting to do is just define the whole shape. Right in here, just using the point of my brush so I can just create that, its little head right there, and letting some of that color just move into that so it has a nice smooth transition. So now I'm going to start adding a little bit of layering over here just to kind of draw out a little bit more color in that part of the wing. And I want to use some of my transparent pyrrole orange. I love this color. It's almost like a burnt orange, and it looks really great when you layer this over brown. Look at that. And then also I'm going to grab some yellow ochre in here and just kind of let that merge together. And then just kind of pull some of the color up in this part of the wing. And this color is sepia, and it's a very, very dark brown. And I'm going to go ahead and grab neutral tint next to it, and some ultramarine blue. Because what I want, these are all really dark colors, and I want this to all merge together, but I don't want it to be flat, and so that's why I'm adding in different kinds of colors. So in the next stage of this, what I'm going to do is take clear water, and I'm just going to paint some short little strokes in here, and then I'm going to grab some cobalt teal blue, and I'm going to go ahead and just drop the paint in, because one of the things that I was teaching you before about watercolor is that the paint is only going to travel where you have moisture. So everything else around here is fairly dry. So if I put the cobalt teal on that spot where I place the water underneath, it's only going to stay in that area. So that's just one little thing you can keep in mind, because watercolor is really spontaneous medium. But if you understand that the paint is only going to travel where there's moisture, then you understand you can work on a section and have the paint stay in that area, and maybe this rest of it's dry, and you can always layer on top of that later. So I'll grab a little bit more of this cobalt teal, place that in here. I just love that color because I really feel like that really expresses these more earth tones that I'm seeing, but I'm kind of pumping the color up a little bit. I'm also placing a stroke here and another one here, and then over the top I'm going to go ahead and just drop some color in over there. Sometimes the trick is remembering where you put the water, so because water's clear. So if you get into that where you've placed water and you don't know where you quite put it on the painting, one thing that can help you is to actually look to the side, and then you can see a shine or a little sheen on the paper. So yeah. What I'm doing is just building up just areas of color, and what I'm going to do is now put some little dashes of water over the top of this layer and put it on either side of those wings, and I'm going to go ahead now and grab some cobalt teal blue and just touch that in there. So that means that because there's water underneath there, that the paint is now going to kind of spread and get a nice fuzzy edge around it. It's going to move a little bit rather than just drying with a sharp edge, and you can see this happening in here. It's a beautiful fuzzy edge, which I think really gives the feeling of something that's more natural and more organic. Towards the end of my painting is usually the place that I will put more sharper lines, you know, or more intricate detail. In the beginning, I'm really wanting the paint to really move around and be more spontaneous. Now I think I'm going to grab some of this neutral tint. Neutral tint is a really good color. It's a lot like Payne's Gray. It's not black. It has more of a bluish purplish cast to it. And when you need to get a really strong dark, I'll often use this on its own. It makes beautiful grays when you water it down, and you can also add it to some of your darker colors too. So I've used other colors like lamp black. They just tend to be more dead looking blacks, and so I try to stay away from those. And neutral tint is just a nice alternative. Okay, and then I'm just kind of filling this in a little bit, and this is going to pool a little bit over here, which means I might get some blooms, but I think that'll really add to the textural quality of this butterfly. And what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and put some water on this edge. So I want you to watch and see what I'm going to do next, because I'm actually going to pull it out with a paper towel because I want to get that nice soft edge along there. So what I'm going to do next is actually go ahead and start painting in these little feelers on here. And I really recommend that if you pencil it in, it's going to be a lot easier to paint these, because sometimes it's a little bit tricky getting these to look even. So I just pencil it in really lightly with before I started to paint it. And what I'm doing is, these usually have these kind of little nodule things on the end. And then I'm going to go ahead and, the brush that I'm using is actually a rigger brush. And that means it's a round brush but very long. And this is really great whenever you want to paint anything that has lines. You can get a nice long stroke. Now this part of my painting is very dry, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do when I need to do something that requires precision. And I'm going to use this part of my hand here and anchor it on the paper. Just make sure though that whatever is underneath is completely dry, because you don't want to smear it. And then I'm going to push down, and then that gives me the freedom to go ahead and get a nice even line. Do you see that? Because otherwise, if you don't have leverage with your hand, it's going to cause you to be shaky. So this is just a good little method for helping out. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same, where I'm pushing into my paper using this part of my hand. and then just taking my fingers and holding tightly onto the brush and kind of pulling that stroke down. Okay? Okay, at this point I've decided to switch to a smaller brush, and this one over here is actually around size 6, and that's because I now want to start doing a little bit more detail work. So I'm going to grab some of my sap green and actually mix some neutral tint in with it, because that's going to give me more of a dark forest green, and that's because the wings are so dark, and so I want to get some of that powerful contrast in there, but I don't necessarily want everything to be what I'm seeing here on my reference, which is almost like the wings are very, very dark black. And I think it's more interesting to have darks in there that are greens and, you know, blues and browns, because that way it has more color in it. So this is some Prussian blue. It's a beautiful navy blue that I use a lot in my paintings. See how gorgeous that is, just mixed in with the green? And this is where you can take artistic license and go ahead and change things up where you feel comfortable doing that. There's nothing wrong also with painting exactly what you see in nature. And I found too in my artistic journey that when I'm painting a brand new subject that maybe I am not very familiar with, sometimes I will go ahead and the first time out the gate paint it exactly what I see, because what I'm doing is I'm getting really familiar with the subject, with the character of what I'm seeing, and then I find that once I get really familiar, that's where I start getting even more creative and explorative, where I might want to change up the color, the shape, or whatever. So whatever you feel like you want to do, which, you know, direction you want to do, can definitely work out for you. Now I'm going ahead and just kind of pulling up some more color here on the wings, and each time I'm adding more color, I'm looking at the overall painting and sort of seeing where I need to take it. More neutral tint this time, and I'm going over here and mixing some of that Prussian blue and sap green in with my neutral tint, and I'm just doing these little dashes, which are short little strokes. Okay, and once again I'm going to use some clear water on my brush. Water is what makes the paint move. If I want it to just be stay put, I'm just gonna, you know, put those strokes down on the dry paper and just leave them. If I want the paint to kind of move and merge around and be a little more spontaneous, I'm going to come back in and add a little bit more water on the edge. So now I'm beginning to finish this by painting around these. They're white, the markings on the wings. And so I'm painting around them because I already drew them in the beginning. These are really beautiful because these really make the wings stand out as having these very dramatic white against dark markings. So beautiful. And clear water so I get a nice lost edge. I'm going to grab now my paper towel and dip it in the water because I'm going to use this to soften these edges. I don't want these edges looking super definite. I want them looking a little bit more lost and spontaneous. So I'm going to pull some of that paint out. And so we're starting to finish the painting now. I'm actually going to put some clear water in here, because I'm going to come back down with my rigger brush and grab a little bit of burnt sienna. And I want to show you why I put the clear water down, because I want to get a really soft edge. You know, if you've ever examined butterfly wings, they have sort of veins in them. But I don't want sharp edges, so you can put clear water down and then just go over it with a thin brush. And what you'll see is you'll get a lovely fuzzy edge, like what I have here, which I think is way more interesting. So we're almost finished with this. I'm going to switch back to my number 6 right now and grab some of my ultramarine blue, and I'm actually going to go ahead and mix that with burnt umber. And before I do that, I've decided that I want to go ahead and pre-wet the paper, because there are some markings on the wings here, and so I'm painting around those and then grabbing some of the dark paint and just dropping it in so we get that wet and wet technique. So this is, I'm dropping paint into clear water. See that? That to me gives it more of a loose feeling, and then pulling the paint down using my number 6 round brush so it kind of all merges together. I just really love this butterfly because it's earth tones and just how dramatic it is, the contrast. And just a word too about inspiration. Whenever you can paint directly from nature, I always think there's an advantage to that. There's nothing wrong with using photo reference at all, and I do that a lot in my own work, but there's something just awesome about seeing something up close and personal. You really get the character. It's much like the difference between emailing somebody and talking to them that way as opposed to seeing them face to face. There's a whole different experience when you are able to see something live. Okay, and I'm going ahead and just putting a few more dashes in here just to create a little bit of interest on the edge of these wings. This is almost finished. I'm really happy with it, and I don't want to overwork it. Less is more when it comes to painting. Also, I always tell myself that if I'm not really sure that it needs a little something else, then you can always come back and do something tomorrow, say, on it. I like to look at things with a fresh eye, and I would say that this is completely finished at this stage. And there's one last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of a washy background. I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to come back and show you how to do that, so that just to get rid of some of this white in the background.